We really saw this as an opportunity to do something that was uniquely different and represented Jarrah values. The traditional methods of planting lineal landscapes on riparian areas, while we consider them to be environmentally valued, the cultural value just wasn't there for the Dja Dja Wurrung people.
So Wamanjika, welcome everyone and hello. My name's Marilyn Nichols, or known as Aunty Marilyn in Dja Dja Wurrung country. I'm a Dja Dja Wurrung elder and I currently work with Jandak Enterprises, of which we work with a program in a yam paddock, healing country program and waterways. So when we're talking about country and healing country and water within the landscape of country, we have a different view on how we see that waterway and how we see that landscape and how we see the plants and the natural environment, including the wildlife, the frogs, the ducks, the crows, or we say wah, in that landscape. So when we look at water in the landscape, we look at water in a different way. It's not just a commodity, it's a living thing in the landscape. So our interest is the flow of water across country and how that water flows all the way down to the mouth of the Murray, where it then intermingles with the salt water and flows into the ocean in South Australia. So for us, water in the landscape and how it flows across country is highly important culturally, because we have a water law, LORE, around that as well, and that is also to hand healthy water onto our neighbouring Trishalona groups further downriver. So because Bendigo is such a higher country of mountains and the landscape's so different to where it would flow downwards towards flatter landscape and then into the Murray River and across red dirt and floodplains country, we felt that the importance of that water be done in a good way and a culturally respectful way. Otherwise we'd be in trouble with the other mobs further downriver for giving them dirty water. So because this landscape's higher country, water will flow down and start from up here when it rains. So if we follow the water story, it rains, the water flows cross country and then it'll flow down into the Bendigo Creek and then it'll make its way down further down towards Yorta country, across Brappa country, Yorta country, then eventually into the Murray River. So we have a cultural responsibility.
Liamsibley from the City of Greater Bendigo. I'm a Senior Water Strategy Officer and responsible for implementing the Reimagining Bendigo Creek project. This project is a long-term vision to renaturalise and revitalise a heavily degraded creek. We're working in partnership with the Dja Dja Wurrung, North Central CMA and a few other partners to make this plan a reality. We're currently in the early phases and there's still a long way to go, but we've got a great partnership and some good momentum. At the moment I'm standing here on the Bendigo Creek. This is a somewhat naturalish section, but it has been heavily modified by development and colonisation essentially. This system is probably not in balance. There's too much sediment, too much nutrients, and it doesn't have much life in it. So it's a lot of work to go, but we've started to heal it, but there's a long way to go too. Bendigo was made by gold, but gold also destroyed the creek. Throughout gold mining, they would have first looked for all the gold they could get on the alluvium areas, and once that had been exhausted, all the stones were overturned, they started to dig up all around the town. And as they dug, there's over 5,000 holes in Bendigo where they've dug up gold, and as they were digging up all this, they'd often wash down all the mud and the sludge. And this sludge started to cause really big problems in Bendigo, where it just sort of sit in places. And they realised, the creeks can't actually move it. So they decided to turn it into a concrete drain and straighten it. There's roughly about 3 kilometres north of here that it's all either bluestone or concrete, and it moves water really quickly, like 8 metres per second. It wasn't designed for water conveyance, it was designed for sludge conveyance. But we're still using it today for water conveyance. But because of that, there's no life in the creek. It's dangerous, and plus it's pretty ugly as well. So we've got a lot to overturn, and it's probably upwards of $100 million over a 20-year lifespan to actually recreate this as a natural waterway that people value and want. At this point in time, the Dja Dja Wurrung have led the way, and they're doing and continue to, and it's really exciting, and they've started to do some in-stream works just upstream from where I am. This is the first time we've tried to recreate a pond within the Bendigo Creek on a grand scale, and we're hoping we'll progressively work down the creek so we can revitalise it and get things like platypus and fish back into the system. There's many sites that we're working on at the moment. We've got some, and they're all in different ages and stages of life. We've got up in the top of the catchment, we've got Kangaroo Flat that's about 12 years old and is full of diversity. Then we've got a site behind, just over here, which is called Wanyarram Dhelk, good waterhole in Dja Dja Wurrung language. That is about 6 years old, and that's starting to get lots of life going in it.
My name's Shane Aunty. I work at Dja Dja Wurrung Enterprises. I'm a project manager. I've been at Jandak for 5 years. This place we're at now, Wanyarram Dhelk, which means good waterhole in Jarrah language, was the first project I've been involved with at Jandak the first 2 years of my employment. The project itself was announced in the Water for Victoria strategic document and named as the Bendigo Creek project. It had a lot of what we would consider run-of-the-mill objectives in terms of outputs. So 10 hectares of vegetation removal, exotic weeds, 10 hectares revegetation, kind of the standard process in terms of usual environmental works. We really saw this as an opportunity to do something that was uniquely different and represented Jarrah values. The traditional methods of planting lineal landscapes on riparian areas, while we consider them to be environmentally valued, the cultural value just wasn't there for the Dja Dja Wurrung people. And considering the creek, the Bendigo Creek was the main catalyst for the funding, we thought within this opportunity we need to start looking at water quality, water monitoring and water values for Jarrah mob and what that means. So halfway through the project, Dja Dja Wurrung Enterprises gained more of a foothold on the project and what the objectives look like in terms of healing water on country. We worked with Aunty who we've met today, and discussed some of those cultural outcomes on country and what they look like. And really what happened from there on was really fast paced and a really good outcome that would suit our needs. And the City of Greater Bendigo had very similar ideas around managing water, but not so much an understanding of the cultural complexities around how we can have both of those things in one place. Cultural returns and cultural education and putting Jarrah people back onto country and exploring layers of the complexities of cultural management and traditional ecological knowledge on landscapes, especially in urban landscapes. So the site we're at today is that Wanyarram Dhelk, which means good waterhole. It's quite a simple design where basically we've put in a small weir across a stormwater section of creek or drain that actually goes through a sedimentation process across, I think there's approximately eight or 10 frog ponds. We call them frog ponds because what's missing on this country here is animals in the landscape because it's been so heavily mined, and in particular this site, which was an old waste dump. So once we removed the trees and removed a lot of the weedy species, we started to dig with the City of Greater Bendigo these frog ponds. And what we have now is a functioning system that takes stormwater that is really quite murky and heavy in sediments, pass it through a range of ponds, that the sediment drops out through the macrophytes. When it hits the macrophytes, the plants, the cultural plants, it drops out. The frogs come in, the birds come in, the people come in. That water's then flushed out through another drain that goes into the Bendigo Creek in better condition than it's come in. It's really important to have an understanding of what that water means and what not treating that water means for Jarrah people having the opportunity to meet cultural obligation, which is around managing country, managing water, passing on clean water, getting their hands into country, planting plants on country, yarning, telling stories, working together, the economic contributions they're making back to the community, back to their own organisation, for their own families. It's supporting a much larger beast than just this project.
All right, so if we're looking at this drain, for example, which drains the water off the roads and people's backyards and off the streets in Bendigo, a rural area, or the greater city of Bendigo, the water would cascade and flow into this drain. So this is a man-made drain. So with that also you get all the pollution stuff like plastics, wrappers, plastic bottles, drinking water bottles, cardboard, sometimes other things as well. And with the plants in mind, that would trap some of that rubbish. And the water would flow down here, past this waterway here, and then it would flow straight into Bendigo Creek. So what's happened is that with the design of these ponds, we've looked at the layout of this flow and changed it. So we're going to show you now how it's been changed into a number of 8 ponds that will filter and clean that water before it runs back into the Bendigo Creek.
So we're at a site here where the main inflow from the drain intercepts into the Wanyarram Dhelk frog ponds. Really simple design. What it is, we've put in a bit of an earthen wall there with sandstone and clay. The earthen wall backs up water, which allows flow in through the Wanyarram Dhelk, but the weir itself won't hold water back in a high flow situation. So it's important that we don't increase flooding or increase any damage to infrastructure. So in a high flow, water will go over that and still bank through. On a low flow, we'll get all this water into the first kind of treatment pond here.
Yep, so with the water flowing through here, we've got a number of wetland plant species that are useful plants for us for weaving, as well as creating a landscape for wildlife, such as ducks to nest in. So this pond here is the first pond, and this pond actually captures a lot of the rubbish that flows from that drain that we previously looked at. So if you look across here, you can see some of the rubbish that's actually being caught in here, and City Council, who work with us in partnership, they will clean that rubbish out. All right, so then the water starts its filtering and cleaning process from this pond in a really natural state, using the plants and the actual flow of the hydrology. So if you look a little bit past the rubbish, you can see some purple flowers as well as other wetland plants. That's the flow of the water then to the next pond.
Yeah, so also within this pond, the species that are used are well recognised within treatment areas like we have here, but what wasn't really recognised was the cultural significance of these plants. So all these weaving plants and food plants and fibre plants are incredibly significant to the Jarrah mob. And as a way of Jarrah looking at country and looking at waterways management, if these plants are here and healthy, the water's often healthy. When they're not on country and they're not around, like for Bendigo Creek for example, you can instantly tell not a good place to be. So when the mob come here and they see all these plants that they are learning about or they are familiar with, it's a great comfort.
All right, so this is the third pond, fourth pond. This one?
Yeah.
So this one, when it was designed, was to be shaped like a boomerang. So it's an arch shaping pond. So the water will come in that end and into this pond here. There's lots of weaving grasses right to the edge of this waterway, so that's to help with the frogs, so that the frogs will feel like it's a great place to come and live. And this particular pond often attracts a lot of the ducks to nest in. But we have got one problem at the moment. The local residents who have pets, such as a dog, do like to bring their dogs here, but they don't understand the concept of the impact that dogs swimming in this pond can have on ducks, the frogs, and including the smaller wetland plants that grow around the edge, such as nardoo and the weaving grasses. So this pond is much cleaner, as you probably find less plastics in here that are flowing through the waterway. I think we've only got one here at the moment, but that may have been dropped here by someone that's littered.
Yeah, and we always kind of end up at this space whenever we're out at Wanyarram Dhelk, talking especially over the other side around how important this pond is in terms of keeping the area clean. And when we have animals come in and stir up the sediment again, it's an issue, but what it does provide, it provides an opportunity for ongoing education for the broader community about the site, and that's something we're all really passionate in. And we want to educate the community about the site, and especially this middle pond, which seems to be attracted to by everyone, which is great. We just need to kind of secure its future a little bit.
So this is the last part of our the chain of ponds that we've built, and the water flows through here, and Shane will talk a little bit more about this, out through here, through this pipe and then back into Bendigo Creek. So the thoughts are that the water would be healthy and cleaner, of which you can see the colour's different again, but also at this site it does something different as well. We've noticed that it actually has more weeds, which indicates that there's probably more seed deposit here from weeds that have been washed through with the water. This particular plant's chicory is an introduced species, so it's a weed, has to go. It's kind of like coffee. Yeah, and then we've got some other ones here as well. So when you look at this place here, for myself as a Wanyarram person, this landscape's different. All I can see here is the entail of the healthy chain of ponds and the native plants, to the only one I can spot here that's pretty well I would use would be the kumbunji. All right, so everything else I wouldn't bother to harvest to weave with if I was going to look for weaving plants from here. So the big comparison, this space compared to the others, which is the case because we had the first pond where it collects rubbish, and this one where the entail of it. So the real ponds that are doing a lot of the work are the ones in between.
We can't achieve on-ground significant works without partnerships. The partnerships within this project and the projects developing within Jandak are crucial. We've seen opportunities to not only educate organisations around cultural knowledge, but to also learn from these organisations. We are working really strongly with the City of Greater Bendigo on developing other project works in the creek that align with some of their ongoing commitments to managing the Bendigo Creek. We also work with the NCCMA, the local water catchment authority. These, and obviously Dhelk, Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning. We're now considered a bit of a player in that space. We're considered, and hopefully will be considered, an equal in that space. We're not reliant on partnerships with other organisations to get things done, but we do achieve more together. It's important that we work together, and we have a role and a responsibility to educate organisations that that aren't educated in the space of engagement with Aboriginal people. And we can only achieve great outcomes if we all share and we all acknowledge that we have a long way to go, but also acknowledge what we have achieved together.